It's sometimes said that ministers preach the sermons that they most need to hear, and I realize that this morning may be one of those cases. It turns my stomach to say it, but we are sliding into another presidential election. This morning is preparing our hearts for what will be an even more vitriolic year of national politics. Most of you have very solid opinions about most issues. This morning's service isn't so much about the commitments themselves, but how we hold on to those commitments and how we engage with people that we disagree with. There are three likely options for Unitarian Universalists. There are those who observe conflict and say, well, there are good people on both sides. All opinions matter. Can we all get along? And the other end of the spectrum, there are people, including many Unitarian Universalists, who know deep down that their own view of the world is right, and that people who hold an opposing view are not only wrong, but those people are bad people. We don't say it, though. And they're intent on hurting the world. We're called to a harder path. It isn't exactly between those two paths I described, but it draws from them both. We're called to both stand firm in our commitments to justice, equity, science, compassion, and to not dehumanize our adversary in the process. This narrow, more challenging path might best clearly be defined by the word love. As it's sometimes said, we're called to love the hell out of the world. For a lot of people, that's a theological expression. Today, I want to consider it as a more political one. We're called to love the hell out of the world. And we cannot do that through mealy-mouthed moral relativism, nor by ferocious self-righteousness. Our path has to be anchored in love. This sermon was first inspired by a book called Waging a Good War, a military history of the civil rights movement. It's by Thomas Ricks. And it looks at the civil rights movement with an eye toward strategy, like a military history. One of the key pieces of the civil rights movement is also a military strategy that most of us don't think much about. It's having a picture of what success looks like beyond beating the adversary. What does it look like the next month or the next year after the campaign? How do we go home after this? On the battlefield, that means allowing your enemy a path by which to retreat. Sun Tzu, the legendary Chinese military strategist, counseled, build your enemy a golden bridge to retreat across. In the case of an ideological battle like the civil rights movement, it means allowing your adversary the opportunity to maintain their dignity in defeat. I find this fascinating. As the desegregation movement was finding tremendous success, Dr. King and James Bevel and other leaders were considering this long-term sticking of the winds. In Birmingham, as they were really getting all of their demands met, the desegregation of lunch counters and bathrooms and hiring some black sales clerks and the formation of a biracial committee to desegregate the schools, they agreed on a plan where these things would be phased in, not immediate. And that slight compromise was a strategic choice. It allowed the adversary to save some face and to feel like they had a little bit of power in the way things went. Now, I know we know King for the saying, justice delayed is justice denied, but he was also a very strategic thinker. a long-range thinker. At the end of the day, the people we disagree with, even the people whose beliefs we find abhorrent, are still our neighbors. After the election, after the court decision, after the law is passed. And as long as we share one country, there's no retreating or going home. We are in this for the long haul. One way to walk this line of radically loving is to separate the critique of ideas from the individual who espouses them. I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but maybe it would be helpful to reframe or to refrain from saying someone is a racist, a homophobe, a bigot, and maybe more accurate to say that they're acting in racist ways, or using homophobic ideas, or they're expressing bigotry in their language. We can point out bad behavior without saying a person is bad themselves. Anytime we box someone else in, anytime we put a label on their identity, we suggest that they are innately that thing, permanently. Boxing someone in is the exact opposite message that we aim for. Hopefully, all of us throughout our lives will grow past the short-sightedness of our past. Hopefully, all of us will shed the racist actions, the homophobic ideas, the bigoted ways of speaking that we have all been touched by and likely participated in. Separating the belief from the person allows space for growth. Some of you listening, especially if you're LGBT, may feel a little queasy at this concept. For decades, homophobic religious leaders have instructed followers to love the sinner but hate the sin. Having been on the receiving end of that concept, I always thought, what is the point of that? It doesn't make me feel any better. You can keep your judgmental love. Thank you very much. But here's the deal. That discipline of keeping love at the forefront of our efforts isn't for the comfort of our adversary or for them to feel better. It's for us, the person making the critique, the ones advocating for change, and are siding with love. It is for us to maintain our own integrity so that we don't become the very narrow-mindedness that we seek to change. Yeah, but what about the really bad guys? I hear some of you thinking. The Klan leaders, the explicitly homophobic people that invite violence. Are we called to honor their dignity and worth? The unfortunate, simple answer is yes. You and I, we don't have the power to take away another person's dignity. What we do have the power to do is to whittle away at our own humanity. Hundreds of years of chattel slavery in the United States, backed by evil theology, and all their attempts were not able to deny the souls of black people or to remove their humanity. Today, America is undeniably shaped by the culture, the spiritual, intellectual influence of black people. That soul was not removed or conquered. If slavery and Jim Crow succeeded in removing any souls or denying any humanity, it succeeded in mangling the souls of white people who absorbed that painful poison. I don't think we have the power to remove the dignity or soul of our neighbors. I don't think we can take away another's humanity. What we can do, when we take on the hubris of thinking ourselves so powerful, so righteous as to doubt another human being's worth, when we begin to think they are inherently less than human, their soul is tainted, when we make that turn, we begin to slice away at our own worth and dignity. Coretta Scott King put it much more succinctly, saying, "Hate is too great a burden to bear. It injures the hater more than it injures the hated." We can't be in the business of hating or questioning the worth and dignity of people we disagree with. I said earlier that this path of change is harder than the easy answers of moral relativism or rejecting people we disagree with as inherently bad. Creating lasting change takes work. It seems like over and over again in life, we learn that there is no easy, effective way. There is no easy way to achieve the things that we really want. Reverend Elizabeth Nguyen writes beautifully about how we UUs want to do the right thing, but sometimes are surprised by how hard it is. She says, folks with more privilege sometimes get caught up here. If it's hard, we must be doing it wrong, we tell ourselves. We are lulled by our experiences of choosing between a hard choice and an easier choice. But many people don't have a choice between hard and easy in life. They choose more frequently between two awful options. Her point is, making meaningful change requires sacrifice of time and energy, and it requires a willingness to build relationships, to get a little vulnerable and put our whole selves into the conversation. Sometimes that hard work and relationship building is with marginalized folks, the ones that we want to support. Sometimes that hard work of relationship building is with people we disagree with. Sometimes it's with people we don't even know. A couple of weeks ago, the Welcoming Neighbors Home group had a booth at the Children's Festival at Gates Elementary School just around the corner. We were there mostly to connect with people about affordable housing, and I spoke with a few people about Tapestry. I was pleasantly reminded that it's pretty easy to connect with people by sharing openly who you are. Before introducing Tapestry or handing anyone a brochure, I just asked if they were settled into a faith community or a church. A lot of them were Catholic. I had a fun conversation with a Jewish dad who was in between congregations. A few weren't part of a faith community, so we talked about Tapestry. Most of us are reluctant to talk with others about our faith. I believe it's because we're not very practiced at calmly sharing our opinion that others might disagree with. It takes vulnerability and courage to calmly, clearly say, "This is what I believe," in a way that's not an argument or a silo of people that we agree with already. It's just a conversation. "This is what I believe. How about you?" "This is what I believe. How about you?" We, and I include myself in this, we make this type of honest conversation way harder than it needs to be. This sermon has mostly been relating to people out there in the world, but beloved, community is as much about how we relate to each other in here as it is about folks out there. Julica Hermon de la Fuente writes beautifully about what she calls holy interruption. And I love this phrase, holy interruption. It's something that we might start practicing here. She tells a story about being at a UU gathering of probably around 40 people, while a difficult and pretty racist presentation was being made. She felt like it wasn't her event to interrupt. She writes, "It was like witnessing a train wreck in slow motion. It was terrible, and no one said stop." I think we've all witnessed these train wrecks from time to time. Usually, unintentionally, a speaker will offer some stereotypes or microaggressions or just simply wrong information. In the experience of Julica, no one stopped the presentation. There was simply tortured silence in the room. But this is part of our taking responsibility for building beloved community. It's our place to interrupt a discussion underway. It's our place to pause and attend to the needs of everyone in the room. And for Unitarian Universalist culture, throwing a wrench into the agenda is destabilizing and generally unpopular. In our mostly white culture, we have valued efficiency and staying on task. We might occasionally be better served by a holy interruption to focus on relationship. So I encourage us together to occasionally say, can we pause for a minute? How have you considered how what you're saying might be hurtful? I wonder what the data on that question say. Is there a different way of framing this that might be in line with our UU values? Is everyone in the room okay? Or just let's take a deep breath together. Our Racial Justice Task Force will soon be leading us through some discussions of the eighth principle. And this proposed eighth principle says, we covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions, that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Now, passing the eighth principle isn't a sure thing. It's something that we are talking about for the whole next year. And mistakes will be made in that conversation by all of us. It's likely even members of the Racial Justice Task Force will inadvertently fumble into some stereotype or microaggression or misinformation that we will need to stop and reassess for. Bringing this eighth principle up for conversation is inviting some constructive conflict in our community. That's okay. It's actually on purpose. I have no doubt that we will be stronger after we practice our ability to disagree in love and to exercise this muscle of holy interruption. So I'll wrap up this sermon this week. I learned that a poem that we've all heard was written by a Universalist in the early 1900s, Edwin Markham. He wrote, "He drew the circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. So may it be. Amen."